Bitch, this is my garage.
This garage is HOA property now.
No, it's not. It's mine.
We'll see about that.
Heavy enough to rattle the frame, followed by a voice that barked, Homeowners Association. Open up. Now. 14-year-old Malik Carter froze in the hallway, his phone slipping from his hand. He had been alone for barely 20 minutes, just enough time for his mom to run to the pharmacy and for his dad, who was supposed to be overseas, to exist only as a face on the fridge and a voice in old voicemails. Malik swallowed hard and glanced through the peephole. Two men stood on the porch wearing dark uniforms that looked official enough at first glance, badges, utility belts, stern faces, but something felt wrong. The badges were crooked, the patches looked cheap, and the wah never came like this. Never yelling, never demanding. I'm a minor, Malik said through the door, his voice shaking despite his effort to sound calm. My parents aren't home. The men exchanged looks. One of them smirked. That's not our problem, kid. We got a complaint. You don't open this door, we'll force entry. Malik's heart began to pound. His dad had drilled safety into him from the time he could walk. Never open the door for strangers, always verify, always trust your instincts. Malik backed away from the door and said, I'm calling my dad. The smile vanished from the man's face. In its place came irritation, then anger. You think you're smart. We're officers. Open the door. I don't see real police markings, Malik replied, his hands trembling. Please leave. That was when the door handle jerked violently. Malik cried out as the door burst inward, wood splintering near the lock. One of the men grabbed him by the collar and yanked him forward, slamming him against the wall. Malik's head rang, his ears buzzing as fear swallowed everything else. You little punk, the man hissed. You think you can disrespect authority? Malik tried to speak, but his breath came out in a sob. A sharp blow struck his shoulder, then another across his arm. Not enough to break bones, but enough to hurt. Enough to terrify. Enough to leave him crying on the floor, his cheek pressed against the cold tile. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the front door opened wider. Step away from my son. The voice was calm, controlled, deadly quiet. Both men turned. A tall figure stood in the doorway, broad-shouldered, dressed in plain clothes that couldn't hide the presence beneath them. His eyes were dark and steady, scanning the scene in less than a second. Broken door, shaking child, strangers with their hands still raised. Malik knew that voice anywhere. He had heard it in bedtime stories, in training talks, in whispered prayers before deployments. Dad, Malik croaked. The man knelt instantly, placing himself between Malik and the intruders. He checked Malik's face, his arms, his breathing. Then he stood. Now, the man said softly, you have exactly 5 seconds to explain why you laid hands on my son. The fake officers stammered, one backing away. Sir, we're law enforcement. The man cut him off. No, you're not. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a phone, his movements precise. Because if you were, you'd know our law doesn't authorize uniforms. And if you were law enforcement, you'd know assaulting a minor is a felony. The men bolted. They didn't get far. The Navy SEAL moved like something unleashed. In seconds, one man was on the ground, pinned with a knee to his back, arm locked in a hold so tight he screamed. The other tripped over the porch step, only to find himself face down beside his partner, wrists secured with zip ties that appeared from nowhere. Neighbors poured out of their houses, phones raised, gasps filling the air. Police. Sirens wailed in the distance. When real officers arrived, the truth unraveled quickly. The uniforms were fake. The badges were plastic. The men had a history, posing as war security to intimidate homeowners, especially those they assumed wouldn't fight back. Especially black families. Malik sat wrapped in a blanket, his dad's arm around him, shaking not just from pain, but from realization. If his dad hadn't come home early. If he hadn't trusted his instincts. If fear had made him open the door. Later that night, after statements and photographs and apologies from officers who looked Malik in the eye and promised justice, the house grew quiet again. Malik sat on his bed while his dad taped cardboard over the broken door. I was scared, Malik whispered. His dad paused. Then he sat beside him. Being scared doesn't mean being weak, he said. It means you knew something was wrong. Malik nodded slowly. They thought I was alone. His father's jaw tightened. That's why they did it. The next morning, the story spread. Fake WA cops arrested. Navy SEAL father. A boy who refused to open the door. Messages poured in, support, outrage, gratitude. The HOA issued a public apology. The community demanded changes. But the real change happened quietly. Malik stood a little taller after that. Not because of what his dad did, but because of what he himself had done. He trusted his instincts. He spoke up. He survived. And his father, a man trained for war, knew the hardest battle had already been fought, making sure his son understood his worth, his right to safety, and his power to say no. Because sometimes, courage isn't stepping out of the shadows. Sometimes, it's refusing to open the door.